Hey guys, Kyle the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for My Hero Academia, Chapter 188. And so, I may as well get the obvious out of the way. This chapter was really short, and yet, funny enough, despite that, the chapter itself didn't really feel basically the story of the chapter itself, it never felt like anything was lost in the story. Everything felt perfectly paced within the span of these 13 pages, and I think that plays into something I've learned about Horikoshi's style is that the way he draws puts heavy emphasis on fast-paced motion and action, basically allowing for pretty much allowing for pretty much natural pacing with not pretty much allowing for natural pacing with pretty much within the scope of the story of My Hero Academia. And actually, in My Hero's case, it works even more because Horikoshi's style works even more here in My Hero Academia because it's basically a style that pretty much lends itself to pretty much the whole world itself of superheroes. Superheroes are not, of course, slow and are not slow and clunky. Are not slow and clunky people. They're pretty much always on the go, always something happening. If you read a comic book, there's always something going on in a comic book. So, and that kind of style, it translates well on. It translates well pretty much on into Horikoshi's manga as well. Like Horikoshi, it's weird. He basically can. At this point, I am convinced that Horikoshi. It's weird to say, but I can't believe it took me this long either. But Horikoshi does very masterfully craft like the basically pretty much all of the traditional styles of a mangaka into basically into the fast paced style of a traditional comic book artist too. So of a traditional Western comic book artist. So yeah, Horikoshi. I gotta give Horikoshi some serious props for that. And in a way, this whole style that Horikoshi has gotten a grasp on, it really it really works to the advantage of My Hero Academia, especially when you look at how the anime itself has managed to incorporate so much material into its adaptation while losing honestly very little. Like the anime's adaptation, I'd say is even a little. I kind of sometimes I kind of prefer the anime over the manga, but everything that the anime does everything right because of of how Orokoshi handles the pacing of his story too. So yeah. um Now, one thing I surprisingly liked in this chapter was the continuing pattern of seeing Hawks openly admit the pretty much all the weaknesses of his quirk because it's pushing forward the contrast of how humble and brutal honest he is compared to Endeavour used to be. And what makes it even more ironic in a way is that Hawks has basically stated before that he never really had any real admirations towards All Might, and yet pretty much throughout his entire introduction, looking back on his entire introduction, there are actually a lot of that pushing forth, and yet looking back throughout everything we've seen of Hawks thus far, there's there's definitely an ironic thing to be. There's something ironic to be said that even though Hawks has stated he never really had any admiration towards All Might, there are some very interesting similarities between the two that have started to pop up. Well, like I said, the majority of them being the fact how humble he is, like pretty much All Might, and honestly how even sometimes brutally honest All Might was. Actually, I think he's actually even more brutally honest than All Might was. But yeah, there's some interesting similarities definitely to draw between Hawks and All Might for sure. It's kind of interesting. It is kind of an interesting role reversal how the more humble hero is the one who pretty much ended up being the number two hero, and the more violent and more, well, I don't want to say violent, but I guess more arrogant hero ended up being the number one hero. So yeah, it's an interesting little switch around for sure. Of course, there were many times throughout the chapter, throughout this basically arc that we have seen Endeavor has definitely changed. So he isn't as arrogant as before. That's for sure. And okay, I admire Endeavor for using his head, logic and all that during this fight. But after all that, with High End, the main after all the back and forth he was doing not even in this chapter but in previous chapters as well. After all that back and forth, after all the analyzing he did and Endeavor did during this fight, the main conclusion he comes to is that High End is sentient. Really, bro? You couldn't have figured that out the first time he talked? I mean, I guess it's one of those stupid things where, like, really? He's sentient. That's the one thing you've come to conclusion to. You haven't come to any other fucking conclusion about him, what his weakness is, or what anything else about him is. You just came to the conclusion that he's sentient. I mean, I guess it was a way of showing that the hero's figuring. I guess it was Horikoshi's way of showcasing that this time of the heroes finally figuring out that he's sentient. I guess, but it seemed like one of those facts that would be obvious and not much explanation needed, even for pretty much all of the characters in the story itself. Like just being around fighting High End, you'd think they'd actually learn. Oh yeah, he's fucking sentient. But yeah, it's like I feel it's one of those things where I feel there was almost a wasted opportunity there, in order for Endeavor to learn. In order to learn something actually useful, like how to defeat High End. But no, he just came to the conclusion that, yeah, he's sentient. Like, really, bro? You couldn't have figured out anything more. No weakness, no nothing. Okay. like I said, it isn't a bad. Like I said, I know I'm harping on it too much, but it's like one of those things where couldn't have figured out anything else, huh? Okay. And alright, I've put it off long enough, but let's talk about the rather intense, bloody conclusion to this fight of Endeavor versus High End. And the fight, I'm not gonna lie, this fight gave me, the conclusion, I guess, to this fight gave me some very real vibes. Not in the sense where it was bad, but more along the lines of just what's okay. More along the lines of me saying, okay, what's going on? What's really going to happen here? Because here's the thing: there are so many death alarms and signals going off in my head, and all of them were pointing towards Endeavor kicking the bucket. Yet every single one of them, I could not listen to. Every single one of them, I had a hard time trusting any of the death flags or death signals that were basically being flashed, that were basically being shown to us before our eyes. Like, why? It was one of the things where I was asking myself, okay, Endeavor, it looks like he's basically he's looking like he's at death's door. He was bloodied up. He was basically physically pushed around by High End at every turn. So why am I having a hard time really trusting any of these death flags? Any of these death flags? Hell, even just the reactions from pretty much from all of Endeavor's family, I really even couldn't take that shit seriously. Like, I was really like I said, I was really having a hard time trusting any of these death flags. Like, all the setup is there, but it's like I'm having a hard time believing that Horikoshi would kill off Endeavor so soon after making him the #1 hero. In a way, it actually feels like the Aoyama fake out all over again. Although it is fair to say that Endeavor is definitely if Endeavor does in fact, like, if Endeavor dies, okay, fine, I'll accept it. But yeah, there's just way too much that said, yeah, Endeavor really isn't gonna die here, is he? But even if he doesn't die, I can see him leaving with more than a scratch. And I really like how one thing I really liked in this chapter is how we see Endeavor getting his left eye. Is how Endeavor getting his left eye punctured out was directly mirrored in the next page with the image of Todoroki's pretty much left side flaring up. Like, it was an interesting mirror and an interesting contrast between father and son in that particular page, to be sure. And honestly, looking at this chapter, I guess looking at it, looking at the chapter, I think Todoroki is actually the answer as to why I don't believe Endeavour is going to die, because his appearance, because Todoroki's appearance in this chapter it feels like he's going to pull an Izuku here. Although this time I think Aizawa is going to anticipate this and try and stop him. I doubt Aizawa will succeed, but he can try, and I think in that situation where Todoroki tries to go off, but Aizawa stops him, I think Aizawa is probably going to come and reach some kind of a middle ground, some kind of a compromise with Todoroki for sure. Like I think it is one of those things where and yeah, it's some of those things where of course the student, like, in terms of Todoroki going out there, it's like putting a rock in a hard place. Like, if Todoroki goes out there, then UA is basically screwed unless they can come to some kind of a compromise here. And the thing about Todoroki, and okay, and I like how, and of course the other thing I like is how in a few short panels we got some very heavy and effective moments of Todoroki finally coming around and feeling genuine sentiment and love towards his father. And to me, much like the Bakugo rejecting the villain scene, I feel that particular scene, it was only made possible because he chose to be around his father and learn from him pretty much after the sports festival, pretty much, rather than completely reject him and not even say he doesn't want to be around him after that. So yeah, I definitely gotta give the development of Todoroki props in this chapter for sure too. But yeah, guys, that's my review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Death Not of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.